Hello and welcome to the Week 9 Streaming and Waiver Wire podcast. I'm your host, Josh Shepardson, and you can follow me on Twitter where I post is at BChat50. And let's jump right into things. The first Waiver Wire ad that I recommended in this week's article is going to be a popular one. I would expect his ownership to approach 100% across all three major sites, but currently, or as of last night when this was written, the ownership rate for D'Angelo Williams sat at 34% on CBS, 27.2% on ESPN, and set at a low of 24% on Yahoo. But with news that Le'Veon Bell is out for the remainder of the season due to a knee injury, it's going to be the D'Angelo Williams show in that backfield for a talented Pittsburgh Steelers offense. He looked rejuvenated in two starts earlier to start the year with Le'Veon Bell serving a suspension. And there's no reason to think that he can't pick up where he left off as a starter earlier in the year and continue to play at a high level. Now, he is over 30, and usually running backs over 30, you know the story with them. They don't tend to produce very well. But D'Angelo Williams isn't your typical north of 30 runner. He split time with Jonathan Stewart in the backfield in Carolina over the recent last few seasons. So does have a little bit more tread on the tires than most backs at his age. And as I noted, this is a really talented offense. And while D'Angelo Williams certainly isn't the focal point of the offense, Antonio Brown is. Martavis Bryant's a key piece in that offense. Heath Miller gets some targets as well. Just being tied to an offense that's frequently in scoring positions is going to be a bonus for Williams, because anytime you're around the end zone, all it takes is him popping a long run to find the end zone. And he's a feature back, and there simply aren't many of those around the league. He's shown off a bit of pass catching skills this year, but he found pay dirt 3 times earlier in the season. He rushed for 206 yards on 42 carries in his 2 starts this year, so averaging over 100 yards per rushing per start. He's a top 10 runner the rest of the season, and dare I say could flirt with a top 5 ranking the rest of the season at the position. So spend whatever you have to get him in fab dollars. If you have the top waiver priority, congratulations for great timing and being able to scoop him up. Even if you don't need a running back, grab him, deal from depth at that point, but do not let somebody else grab him. I don't care what your team needs are. By securing D'Angelo Williams, you can fill your team need through trade and through other means. Next up is a player who I saw the rarest of things, or maybe not literally the rarest of things, but a change of team in season via trade. You just don't see that much in the NFL. Unlike Major League Baseball, the NBA, and the NHL, NFL teams don't tend to trade players in season, and in a lot of ways it makes sense. I mean, NFL playbooks are rather complex. It's tough to learn them mid-season, and the value of draft picks these days is as high as ever. Salary cap implications and things of that nature cut down on trades as well. But Vernon Davis sent from the lowly 49ers to the still undefeated Denver Broncos. And this means that he's going to be united with 2 people who can seriously impact and improve his fantasy value down the stretch. And that's Peyton Manning, who has historically liked to use his tight ends. See guys like Jacob Tamme, Dallas Clark, and Julius Thomas as recently as the last couple of seasons, who have had big seasons with Peyton Manning, the sheriff, running the show. And Gary Kubiak is the other player, or the other person who can have a big impact on Vernon Davis. Likes to incorporate the tight end in his offense, just hasn't had the tight end to do that with this year, with Julius Thomas departing in the offseason via free agency. I mean, the zombie of Owen Daniels isn't what he used to be. Followed Gary Kubiak around a little bit, but just doesn't have much left in the tank yet. Still ranks 3rd on the team in targets with 32. Ranks 3rd in receptions with 17 and receiving yards with 129. It's been a 2-man duo at the top of the receiving standings for the Broncos, with Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders leading the way. They should still continue to lead the way, but Vernon Davis is definitely a significantly more dynamic receiving tight end than Owen Daniels at this point in both of their careers. We're not talking necessarily peak years Vernon Davis, but this is a guy who is just a few years removed from a big 2013 season in which he caught 52 passes for 850 yards and a whopping 13 touchdown grabs. So Vernon Davis has been underutilized in recent years. In the last 2 years with the 49ers, even this change of offensive coordinator with Greg Roman departing for the Bills in the offseason hasn't been enough to jumpstart Vernon Davis. But it's tough to blame Davis when the offense is scoring under 14 points per game in San Francisco. Colin Kaepernick has been bad enough that he was just benched for Blaine Gabbert this week. So, I mean, he exits one really nightmarish situation and joins a playoff-bound Denver Bronco team that is cooking on all cylinders. And even with Peyton Manning's season not up to his usual standards, he is coming off of his best game of the season, showed some life in his arm this week off of the bye week. If he can keep that momentum rolling and Vernon Davis can pick up the playbook fairly quickly, he could be a difference maker down the stretch. And even if you don't need a tight end, if you got a bench spot to work with and your league allows using tight ends in the flex position, Vernon Davis is worth a speculative grab to see what he does working with Gary Kubiak and Peyton Manning, because the ceiling's high enough that at worst you may have a trade chip here before your league trade deadline. Moving on to the streaming options this week, there are certainly some good ones. And let's start at quarterback with Jay Cutler, owned in 60% of CBS leagues, 20% of ESPN leagues, and 32% of Yahoo leagues. He is widely available. Quietly, Cutler's playing at a very decent level this season. He's passing for 240.3 yards per contest this year, which isn't a big number, but he is sporting a solid 8-to-4 touchdown to interception ratio at better than 2-to-1. That's solid. And after tossing 18 picks last year, it's quite surprising to see him doing a much better job taking care of the football. In fact, his 1.9% interception rate, according to Pro Football Reference this year, would be a new career best if the season ended today. So he's doing a much better job of taking care of the football. And hopefully he can continue to do that while he's without his dynamic back, Matt Forte. The burden is going to be put on Cutler to air it out just a little bit more, most likely. The over-under total this week in the Bears-Chargers game is 49 points, according to Pinnacle Sports. Nice, big, juicy total. The spread isn't super crazy, but the Bears are 4-point underdogs, which means that they should be playing catch-up. So that's further reason to fuel speculation that Cutler will be airing it out more this week. The Chargers are more giving on the ground, more on that shortly, than they are through the air. But Cutler looks like a good grab this week if you are hurting a quarterback and you need somebody to plug and play this week. Speaking of more from that game, Jeremy Langford is the guy who projects to step in for Matt Forte. Filled in for him this week after Matt Forte left injured, and ran for 46 yards on 12 carries. Solid performance in Forte's absence. The rookie runner was a fourth-round pick in this year's draft. He was a highly productive runner at Michigan State, and he ran the fastest 40-yard dash time among running backs at the NFL Draft Combine at 4.42 seconds. So definitely has some speed. He's not a little scat back either. He's 6 foot tall, weighs 208 pounds. Certainly not a big bruiser, but as a productive college runner that's got some speed to him, that's a nice combination for a guy who's going to be making his first NFL start against the most giving from a fantasy points per game perspective, according to Pro Football Reference, defense in the Chargers. They have had huge struggles with bottling up running backs, and Langford's going to get a nice, cushy, soft landing spot for his first NFL start. And only just 8% of CBS leagues, 2.8% of ESPN leagues, and 8% of Yahoo leagues. That ownership rate's going to skyrocket with news of Forte missing a few weeks, or likely missing at least a few weeks. Langford's going to be stepping in as a primary running back, and anytime those emerge during the season, ownership rates jump. But Langford could have some multi-week viability, but for this week alone, certainly like him as at least a flex, if not an RB2. Next up is another guy who is going to get the call in absence of an injured player. And Keenan Allen lacerated his spleen. He's going to miss some time. He's out indefinitely. And while Malcolm Floyd was the receiver who benefited the most in Allen's absence in Week 8, Stevie Johnson, I think, is the safer play, higher floor. He's been productive in recent seasons despite playing with some subpar quarterbacks, to put it mildly. And he's getting to play with the best quarterback he's ever played with in his career, in Phillip Rivers. Rivers does a good job of spreading the football around, but Stevie Johnson's been an efficient receiver at times throughout his career. I expect him to get some targets. I think Gates will obviously be the primary beneficiary in that offense. Ladarius Green is healthy. He did leave the last game early. I think you're going to see some 2 tight end sets and see Green get a bump in value. But this week, good matchup for the Chargers against the Bears. The Bears are allowing the 5th most fantasy points per game to receivers in 2015. So Stevie Johnson draws a cushy assignment. I do like him this week, and he is widely available if you're looking for a flex option or a wide receiver 3. Next option coming off of a big game is going to get an ownership boost based on that alone. But the reason that I like Heath Miller this week is a showdown with the Raiders. Basically, if you've got a tight end that's playing the Raiders, they instantly get a monstrous boost to their fantasy value. No team is allowed more fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends than the Raiders. They have been wretched against them this year. Tight ends are averaging a touchdown per contest against the Raiders this year. And Heath Miller just had a monster game going off for 10 receptions and 105 receiving yards in Big Ben's. I wouldn't call it a triumphant return since they did lose to the Bengals, but in his return from knee injury this past week against the division rival Bengals, as Big Ben shakes off the rust a little bit, you can expect him to play better. And the absence of Le'Veon Bell certainly does have the potential to open up some more looks to a guy like Heath Miller, who really wasn't even a secondary option, was more of a tertiary or lower option in this offense. And while it's certainly a talented offense, as I noted with D'Angelo Williams, getting a bump up in the pecking order is definitely always a good thing. Final streaming option we're going to discuss is from this week's Thursday night football contest. And while I like the Eagles better defensively this week, they are higher owned across the fantasy football outlets or platforms or whatever you like to refer to them as than the Bengals. Bengals are owned on more than 50% of rosters on just one of the major fantasy football outlets at CBS at 57%. They're owned in under 40% of leagues in ESPN and Yahoo, so they are widely available. And they are going to be, and I like this defense last night when I wrote about them, when it wasn't clear that Johnny Manziel was going to be the starter this week. I like them even more against Johnny Manziel this week than I did against Josh McCown when I wrote this article. Johnny Manziel was just flat out embarrassed last year when he faced the Bengals. I do think he's a better player this time around than he was at this point last year, but that Bengals defense is no joke. It's a big spread. The game is in Cincinnati. The Bengals are coming off of a big win. I don't expect a letdown game against after beating the Steelers. This is an in-state, in-division, the AFC North Division rivalry game against the Browns, and I would expect the Bengals to really come in fired up. Defense has been pretty good, and the Browns have been struggling with keeping their quarterbacks upright and taking care of the football. Turned the ball over 17 times, which is the second most turnovers by an offense this year, and they've allowed the 5th most sacks with 27. So the Bengals have a very high ceiling and a high floor this week. Love them this week. Like them a lot better than a number of more talented, higher-owned defenses this week. So even if you own a very good defense, and let's say defense is named the Broncos or perhaps the 14-point favorite New England Patriots, if the Bengals are available in your league and you've got a roster spot to work with, I would advocate grabbing the Cincinnati Bengals and starting them over even a unit like Carolina, for instance. I mean, the matchup is certainly significantly better than facing Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. So go ahead and go grab the Bengals. Thank you for tuning in this week. I'll be back next week to talk about some more free agent or waiver options as well as some streaming options. Good luck this week. Check out all the great content at fantasyfootballcafe.com and get on the forums and get active. It is a fun place to hang out. A lot of good stuff going in there. If you got roster questions, certainly get on there. There are a number of very knowledgeable people who are happy to help you make some tough decisions, make some tough cuts, make some ads, make some trades. So get in there, get active. We've only got so many more weeks of the fun NFL season, so take advantage of them while we've got it. And until next time, good luck this week, and hopefully you win your matchups. Take care.